You ever notice how some people walk into a room and without even raising their voice, everyone listens? That's not because they're the loudest. It's because they sound assertive. Now, let me clear this up. Assertive is not aggressive. Aggressive says, I'm right, you're wrong. Assertive says, I respect me and I respect you. So how do you actually sound assertive? Three things: tone, words, and timing. Tone first. You don't need to be louder. You need to be steady, even, calm. Think about when a pilot talks during turbulence. They don't scream. They stay measured. That's how you sound safe. That's how you sound in control. Next, your words. Assertive people cut out the fluff. They don't say, I think maybe we could possibly. They say, or this doesn't work for me. Short, direct, respectful. Last, timing. Assertiveness is often about what you don't say right away. Pause before you answer. That pause shows you're not rushed. You're not pressured. You're choosing your words. That's power. And here's the kicker. People mirror you. When you stay calm, they calm down. When you're clear, they get clear. So if you want to sound assertive, keep your tone steady. Use direct words. Own the pause. You don't have to be the loudest voice in the room, just the clearest one. When people hear the word assertive, they often confuse it with being aggressive. They imagine someone barging into a conversation, speaking over everyone else, and demanding their way. That's not assertiveness. That's aggression. And there's a big difference between the two. Aggression is about dominance. It says, I win, you lose. It puts one person above the other, and it often leaves the other side feeling disrespected, dismissed, or even attacked. Assertiveness, on the other hand, is about balance. It says, I respect myself, and I respect you. That balance is what makes someone sound confident without being arrogant, strong without being overbearing, and clear without being harsh. Imagine this. You're in a meeting and someone suggests a plan you know won't work. If you're passive, you stay quiet, nod along, and hope the conversation moves on. If you're aggressive, you might cut them off and say, that's a terrible idea. But if you're assertive, you hold your ground while still showing respect. You might say, I see where you're coming from, but here's my concern with that approach. Notice what happens there. You didn't fold, but you also didn't attack. You stood in the middle where assertiveness lies. Being assertive is not about volume. It's not about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about the weight behind your words. People listen not because you overpower them, but because your words are carried with respect. Respect for yourself because you're not afraid to speak your truth. Respect for the other person because you deliver that truth in a way that doesn't belittle them. That's why assertiveness often earns more trust than aggression ever could. Aggression might win a battle, but assertiveness wins relationships. Let's take another example. A coworker keeps interrupting you during conversations. If you're passive, you let it slide, even though you feel frustrated inside. If you're aggressive, you snap back with, "Stop interrupting me!" That might shut them down, but it also creates tension. Assertiveness gives you another option. You could say, I'd like to finish my thought, and then I'd love to hear your perspective. That statement protects your space while still giving the other person room to contribute. You set a boundary without starting a fight. That's the difference. Assertiveness also shows up in everyday life, not just at work. Think about being at a restaurant. The server brings you the wrong meal. If you're passive, you eat it anyway because you don't want to cause a scene. If you're aggressive, you push the plate away and say, this isn't what I ordered. Fix it. If you're assertive, you smile and say, I actually ordered the salmon, not the chicken. Could you help me with that? Again, it's the same principle. Stand up for yourself while still showing respect. Here's the truth. People remember how you make them feel. Aggression makes people feel small. Passivity makes people feel unheard. Assertiveness makes people feel equal. And when people feel equal, they listen. They may not always agree with you, but they're far more likely to take your words seriously. That's the real power of assertiveness. It's also important to understand that assertiveness is a skill, not a personality trait. Some people think, well, I'm just not naturally assertive. That's not true. Assertiveness is something you practice. It starts with clarity, knowing what you need, what you want, and what your boundaries are. Then it moves into communication. How do you express those needs in a way that's firm but not forceful? The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. And if you've ever watched someone who's truly assertive, you'll notice something interesting. They don't rush. They don't fill silence with nervous words. They don't bend just to avoid conflict. They hold themselves steady, and in doing so, they steady everyone else around them. That steadiness is not aggression. It's not passivity. It's the middle ground where respect for yourself and respect for others' meat tone matters more than most people realize. You can say the exact same words two different ways, and one way will make people shut down while the other makes them lean in. The difference isn't the content, it's the delivery. That's why when we talk about sounding assertive, tone comes before anything else. It's the foundation. You can have the clearest words, the best reasoning, the strongest point, but if your tone is shaky, rushed, or defensive, your message loses power. Assertive tone is steady, it's calm, it's measured. It's not about being loud, it's about being grounded. Think about a pilot during turbulence. When the plane hits rough air, everyone looks to the pilot. If the pilot's voice came over the intercom shaky, panicked, or rushed, the passengers would panic too. But that's not what happens. Pilots are trained to sound steady, no matter how bumpy it gets. They say, "We're experiencing a little turbulence. Please remain seated, calm, even, controlled." That tone tells everyone, we've got this. The situation hasn't changed, but the way it feels has changed because of tone. That's the same effect you can have in conversations. People take their emotional cues from how you sound, not just what you say. Now, let's put this into real life. Imagine you're at work and someone misses a deadline. If you raise your voice, your tone tells them you're more interested in punishing than solving. If you whisper or trail off, your tone tells them you don't really mean what you're saying. But if you keep your voice even firm and calm, your tone says, "I'm serious, but I'm not here to attack you." That's the kind of tone people respect. It communicates strength without hostility. Assertive tone also has a rhythm. It doesn't rush. It doesn't tumble over itself. It gives space between sentences. That space signals confidence. People who feel like they're not being heard often speed up, as if more words will force attention. But the opposite is true. The calmer and steadier tone, the more people lean in. Pauses let your words sink in. They give weight to your message. A fast tone feels like you're trying to catch up. A steady tone feels like you're already in control. Another place tone shows up is in conflict. When tempers rise, voices rise. If you match that energy with aggression, the situation escalates. If you shrink back with passivity, you lose your voice completely. Assertive tone stays level. It doesn't climb with the other person's anger, and it doesn't collapse under it either. It stays right in the middle like an anchor. That's what makes people stop and recalibrate. They can yell, but you don't have to match them. You can hold steady, and eventually they notice the difference. There's also body language inside tone. You can hear posture in a voice. Someone slouched, looking down, speaking softly will sound hesitant. Someone sitting upright, shoulders back, breathing evenly, will sound more assertive even before you process the words. The tone reflects the body. If you want to sound steady, you need to feel steady. That's why breathing matters. A calm breath slows your voice down. It removes the edge of nervousness. It keeps your tone even. Simple, steady breathing can turn a shaky voice into an assertive one. Tone matters in everyday conversations too. Say you're setting a boundary with a friend. If your tone is apologetic, they may not take you seriously. If your tone is harsh, they may feel attacked. But if your tone is calm and steady, they hear you clearly without feeling pushed away. The content may be, "I can't do that for you," but the tone determines whether it lands as rejection or respect. That's why people often remember how you said something long after they forget the actual words. Tone leaves the impression. You don't have to be naturally bold or outspoken to have an assertive tone. You just need to train yourself to slow down, breathe, and steady your delivery. Think about it like music. Two people can play the same notes on a piano. One plays them rushed and uneven, and the song sounds messy. The other plays them smooth and measured, and suddenly the song sounds beautiful. The notes are identical, but the tone makes all the difference. Words carry weight, and the way you choose them makes the difference between sounding unsure and sounding assertive. Assertive people don't drown their sentences in extra fillers or soften their requests with unnecessary apologies. They know that clarity is power. When you speak with clear, direct words, you don't leave room for confusion, and you don't invite people to dismiss what you're saying. Think about the phrases most of us use without even realizing it. "I just wanted to ask, maybe we could." "I was thinking, if it's not too much trouble." These are the verbal equivalents of shrinking in your seat. They signal doubt before you've even made your point. Assertiveness starts by stripping away the fluff. Instead of, I just wanted to ask if maybe you could help me with this, you say, can you help me with this? It's shorter, it's clearer, and it lands stronger. Being direct doesn't mean being rude. It doesn't mean barking orders or skipping kindness. It simply means you stop hiding behind unnecessary words. You respect your own message enough to put it out there without apology. Imagine telling a team member, I was kind of hoping you'd have that report ready. That phrasing leaves the door wide open for excuses. But if you say, I need the report by 3 p.m., you've set a clear expectation. The second version is assertive because it leaves no doubt about what you're asking. Clarity also helps people trust you. When you're vague, people aren't sure where you stand. They don't know what you mean, and they may even question whether you know what you mean. But when you're clear, people relax. They don't have to guess your intentions. They know exactly what you want, and they can respond accordingly. That's why assertive words often calm a room instead of stirring it up. Even if people don't agree with you, they know what they're working with. Ambiguity breeds tension, but clarity builds trust. Another part of using assertive words is learning to replace apologies with gratitude. Many people water down their message by saying, sorry, when they've done nothing wrong. For example, sorry for bothering you. But phrasing undercuts your confidence. Instead, shift it to gratitude. Thank you for taking a look at this. Same request, completely different impact. Gratitude acknowledges the other person without shrinking yourself. It keeps the respect, but removes the unnecessary apology. Assertive communication also avoids over-explaining. When people feel nervous, they often pile on extra sentences to justify themselves. But the more you explain, the more you sound like you're trying to convince yourself. Assertive people state their point clearly and stop. For instance, if you're declining an invitation, you don't have to launch into a long explanation about your schedule, your reasons, and your guilt. You can simply say, I won't be able to make it. That's enough. Direct, respectful, and complete. Adding more words only weakens the statement. Think about how children test boundaries. If you say, maybe later, they'll push again. If you say, we'll see, they'll keep asking. But if you say no with a steady tone, the boundary is clear. The same applies to adults. People respect a direct answer more than a vague one, even if they don't like the answer itself. Clarity prevents misinterpretation. When you leave your words open-ended, others will fill in the blanks with their own assumptions, and that often creates more conflict than the truth ever would. Using direct words doesn't mean stripping away empathy. You can be assertive and still kind, saying, I can't take this on right now, but I appreciate you asking me. Balances clarity with warmth. The assertive part is the boundary you can't take it on. The respectful part is the appreciation. Assertiveness always walks that line. It's not a hammer. It's a balance between firmness and respect, between standing your ground and leaving the other person's dignity intact. Practice is the key. The first time you cut out extra words, it might feel blunt. It might even feel uncomfortable, like you're being too harsh. That's only because you're used to softening everything you say. Over time, you'll see that most people don't hear your direct words as harsh at all. They hear them as confident. They hear them as clear. And the more you practice, the more natural it feels to leave out the fillers, the over-apologies, and the extra sentences that never needed to be there in the first place. Silence can feel uncomfortable, but when you're learning to sound assertive, the pause is one of your strongest tools. Most people rush to fill silence because they're afraid it looks like weakness, or they think it will make the conversation awkward. But in reality, the pause communicates control. It shows you're not scrambling for words, you're not desperate to be understood, and you're not pressured into giving a quick reaction. You're choosing your words carefully, and that choice shows confidence. Assertive communication doesn't just come from what you say, but also from what you don't say. Think about how powerful it feels when someone asks a tough question and instead of answering right away, you take a moment. That pause signals that you're thinking, you're weighing your response, and you're not afraid to hold the space. People notice. They lean in. They wait for what's coming next. If you answer immediately with a flood of words, it can look like you're on the defensive. If you pause, you look composed. You look steady. The silence is not empty. It's working for you. Pausing also stops you from saying things you'll regret. In heated conversations, words can fly faster than you intend, and sometimes they come out sharper than you mean them. A pause acts like a filter. It gives you just enough space to choose words that are clear and respectful instead of reactive. Assertiveness is never about reacting first, it's about responding with intention. And you can't respond with intention if you don't give yourself a beat to think. The pause also changes how others see your message. Imagine someone giving instructions at work. One version says, I need this report by 3. So yeah, if you can get it done, that'd be great, thanks. That rush of words feels scattered. But imagine instead, I need this report by 3. Silence. That pause lets the words land. It gives them weight. It makes the request feel important, not casual. That the pause is what turns a statement from background noise into something people remember. There's also another layer to owning the pause. It communicates that you're not afraid of tension. Many people avoid silence because they're worried it will make others uncomfortable. But discomfort is not always a bad thing. In fact, sometimes it's exactly what creates progress. If you set a boundary and then pause, the other person might sit in that silence for a moment. That silence is where the message sinks in. If you rush to soften it, you take the weight out of your own boundary. Owning the pause means you're willing to let the message do its work without jumping in to cushion it. Pausing also helps in negotiations. Whether it's a salary discussion, a business deal, or even dividing household responsibilities, silence can be your ally. When you make your request and then pause, you resist the urge to talk yourself down. Too many people sabotage their own position by filling the silence with compromises before the other person has even spoken. They'll say, I was hoping for this raise, but if that's too much, I'd settle for less. The silence between the request and the response is where your power is. When you pause, you give the other side space to process without handing them the advantage. Another benefit of pausing is that it makes you sound more thoughtful. Quick, constant talking can make you look nervous, like you're trying to prove something. Slow, deliberate speaking with pauses makes you look reflective and confident. People associate thoughtfulness with credibility. They assume you've considered what you're saying. Even if you haven't fully thought it through yet, the pause gives you time to do exactly that while still appearing composed. Owning the pause is not about manipulation. It's not about dramatic silence to intimidate someone. It's about control of your pace, your message, and your presence. It tells the room, I'm not here to chase the conversation can come to me. That shift in energy changes how people respond to you. Instead of rushing past your words, they sit with them. Instead of dismissing your boundaries, they recognize them. Instead of steamrolling your perspective, they wait for it. All because you were willing to pause and hold the silence